Welcome to Belonging Reimagined. I'm your host, Dr. Mona. As a mental health therapist, professor, and researcher, I guide folks in owning their belonging journey and exploring barriers to belonging. In this podcast, I explore real stories with phenomenal guests about how to experience both interconnection and interdependence. And my hope for you is that you learn ways to experience more connection in the world around you and the world within yourself. We don't have to do this life thing alone. You're right where you belong. Folks, we have today the Dr. Allison V. Thompkins, who is brilliant, beautiful, bright soul, and we are so blessed and fortunate to have you share just so much wisdom and expertise and all the great things. I'm going to hold up the book. This is Dr. Allison's book, Spirituality is for Everybody. And Dr. Thompkins wrote this book specifically to talk about how people who are living with a disability or people who are disabled or disabled people can find more connection and create inclusivity for themselves in spiritual spaces. And this is a topic, y'all, that is near and dear to my heart. Being a person who I consider to be myself deeply spiritual, also being a disabled person myself with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and a number of other physical things, also being autistic. This is a topic that is, I can't say near and dear to my heart enough. I mean, it is central to the way for me personally that I move through the world. And for that, I thank you, Dr. Thompkins, for writing this book, for putting so much of your soul into this. It is beautifully written. It's an easy read in terms of just logistically being able to actually sit down and read it almost like a story. And it's wonderful. I recommend it really for everyone. Like, you don't have to be disabled. We can be allies as well. So for that, I just want to say I appreciate your being here and being a part of this show that we're doing. So thank you so much, Dr. Allison.
Well, thank you for that incredible introduction. I am all warm and fuzzy inside now. So before we begin, I'd like to do a couple of housekeeping things, if you will. So first, to make sure this session is accessible to those who are blind or who have visual disabilities, I'd like to give an image description of myself. So I'm a black woman sitting against shimmery gold pillow. I love anything shiny. I have a purple neck pillow to support my head, glasses. My hair is in a bun with my trademark flower in my hair. So that's item number one. Item number two is, due to the disability, as I was speaking for long periods of time, it's tiring, not quite the best idea for my muscles. So I'll answer what I can using my natural voice. And then once my muscles give me the cue, I'll transition to using my AAC device, which is also known as a communication device. So I think that's everything from my end. Mona, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And for my image description, today I have straight dark hair. It's a little bit wavy. Sometimes it's very, very curly, but today is not one of those days. I have medium brown skin. I'm Egyptian American. I have big green eyes and a big mouth, figuratively and literally. I have a slenderish kind of body, and I'm sitting against an ivory colored leather chair. And behind me, there are various symbols symbols that represent my culture as an Egyptian woman. And there's the flower of life that's in a wooden shape that looks like a lot of different circles. And then there is a blue eye that's behind me, and also a hemza, and a few other things behind me that represent my culture. And so I'm really proud to share that with all of you. I am wearing a white t-shirt and 2 shorter rose gold necklaces because I like shimmery and shiny too. And I am wearing a cardigan for now, but that might come off, and it's kind of a mocha, a light mocha color. So at least now I don't know how it comes across for other people on camera. So here we go. And I got to tell you, this is a topic I'm so excited about. Let's talk first about the type of language that we use. Some people prefer what's called identity first language. And that is, for example, saying I'm a disabled person. And other people prefer person first language, where that's a person living with a disability. I tend to use identity first language. That's something that you'll hear throughout the episode. That's the preference for a large majority of folks. Having said that, we understand that some folks prefer person first language, but just want to clarify that today it will mostly be identity first language. So I have to get to this book. I heard about your book, and you don't know this, so I'm going to tell you this. I heard about this book actually last year. So my partner is in a graduate program for clinical mental health, almost going to graduate here in a few months. And yes. And he's amazing. He specializes in neurodivergence, identifies as neurodivergent, identifies as ADHD, has a wife who's clearly disabled, and was sharing some things in one of his classes one time, and has a classmate last year who has cerebral palsy, who says, you have to pick up this book by this amazing author. And my husband came out of class and said, I heard about this book called Spirituality is for Everybody. And he's like, I want to pick it up. And so he did. And so when I told him that I was meeting with you today, he was like, no way, are you serious? And he was fanboying, and he was so excited, and he can't wait to hear the episode and to watch the episode. And so, yeah, there's a little nugget of fun. And so I was fangirling when I found out that you were willing to come on here, because we have this mutual friend and colleague who connected us, lucky me. And I was like, yeah, I know who this is. I have the book already. So we were thrilled to have you here. So having said that, Dr. Allison, can you tell us about the disability that you live with?
So I was born with cerebral palsy, which is also known as CP. We'll hear that acronym a lot during the podcast episode. So CP is caused by damage to the brain either before, during, or right after birth. And in general, it just causes a person to have difficulty controlling their muscles. Now, what that means to each individual depends on that specific individual. Well, for me, what that means is my muscle tone fluctuates very quickly from high to low, right to high. Sometimes it fluctuates a lot in an hour, sometimes in a single minute. And those can be very interesting minutes, let me tell you. And so because my muscle tone fluctuates so much, I have an abundance of involuntary muscle movement, and any movement requiring coordination necessitates a great deal of energy and focus. So anything from speaking to holding my head up to using my hands, it's a bit like running a marathon. But so that's CP in 5 minutes or less.
Yes, yes. And that can be really exhausting, like you said. It can be taxing on you physically, which can become taxing mentally. And oftentimes, from what I understand, and I know even with my own body, can oftentimes require a tremendous amount of planning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So and rest. Oh yes, and the planning has to include the rest, right? So, many folks grew up finding community. We talk a lot about community belonging on this podcast, but they find community through their spiritual practices or in spiritual spaces, especially if it's rooted in some kind of religion, historically like mosques or temples or churches. And a lot of folks are now moving to find spirituality in other kind of spaces. We hear people going to yoga studios or prayer circles or drum circles, for example. And while those spaces can be beneficial for a lot of folks, in your book, you emphasize the importance of developing a more customized spiritual practice that fits who you are or what your needs are require. And I've heard some people say that they worry that developing this very tailored down individual kind of practice could create some level of isolation from other people. And so I have really a two-part question here, Dr. Allison. So the first part is, how can we go about creating these tailor-made spiritual practices? How do we even do that? What does that look like, right? And can this approach, or how can this approach really create and increase belonging?
for the purposes of our discussion, I'm going to give kind of a broad overview, but please feel free to pick up our book if you want more step-by-step guidance. So the first thing to do is explore what's out there. It's hard to do in practice if you don't know what exists. So please, Google, read books, read my book, talk to people, just learn what exists. And as you're exploring, see what practices intrigue you, what may cause your heart to flutter, or little butterflies in your tummy. See that all hits from your spirit that practice might have something for you. Once you find one practice that you decide, yes, I want to try this one, learn the steps required to do that practice. Mm-hmm. And once you know those steps, decide on how frequently you want to do the practice. Now, I teach my clients, no matter their disability status, whatever you decide you can do, chop it in half. People tend to overestimate what they can do. So, for example, if you decide you want to keep a gratitude journal 6 days a week to start with, keep it 3 days a week and slowly increase to whatever your maximum is. Now, once you have one practice in hand and you're comfy and you're rocking and rolling, add another practice and go through the same steps. I emphasize doing at least 2 practices because we got all multifaceted people, and so we want different avenues to consciously connect with the love that we intrinsically are. And so by doing more than one practice, you can more deeply embody your connection with all of love and all of creation. Now, please don't get me wrong. You don't need to do every practice every day or even every week. Myself, I do one practice every day, but I do another practice twice a month. So really, it's up to what works for your body and your spirit. I really emphasize following your intuition and your physical side, and you'll know exactly what to do. Yeah. Now, for the second part of the question, I'm going to transition to using my AAC device. My muscles are letting me know it's time to relax a bit.
Okay.
When you begin doing spiritual practices, you begin to own, to act from, and to lean into the fact that you belong to the divine. As you lean into your belongingness to the universe and to love itself, you plant the seed, the intention, that you are ready to experience belonging on this earth. Because of this intention, the universe rises to meet you by creating more opportunities for you to experience belonging. To experience this outcome, though, your spiritual practice must get you into the flow of the divine. The practices that are most effective at doing this are those that are tailor-made for you, because they are aligned with your unique combination of mind, body, spirit, and soul. These practices honor you and the body you have been gifted with for this lifetime. Spiritual practices that are customized for you feel good as you do them, which puts you into the flow of the divine. Because these practices feel so good to your body, mind, and soul, you don't have to focus on how to do the practice. Instead, you are able to allow the practice to flow as you focus on your inner world. In essence, the doing of the practice fades into the background, and the stillness that the practice is meant to cultivate in you becomes your focus. That stillness is your connection with the divine. Indeed, it is your divine nature. Being present to that stillness leads you to embody your oneness with the divine. This embodiment happens more frequently and more profoundly when doing practices that are created for you, because these practices are completely aligned with how you were created to experience the divine. As you more deeply embody your oneness with all of life, you come to feel your belonging to all that surrounds you more and more.
See, I love this because, first of all, we are not just one part, right? There's so many different parts to who we are. And when you say, Dr. Allison, that we are multifaceted humans, it really resonates so deeply for me. And I know it will for so many other people. It's like part of us wants to go out. Part of us wants to stay home, right? That would be an example. And having a spiritual practice that is multifaceted is really necessary in order to align with who we are as well. And we're not all the same people. So I can see people sometimes getting kind of almost judgy with their spiritual practices and being like, well, this is what you need to be doing. Well, maybe it doesn't align with another person in the same kind of way, right? And I can see you nodding your head. So we have to be willing to accept that whoever you are, in whatever body that you're in, you are not the same body, the same person as someone else. Even if you have an identical twin, you're not the same person. And so customizing your spiritual practice to what works for you is absolutely mandatory in order for you to regularly feel alignment with, what you're calling the divine, or even just feeling alignment within yourself, however way you perceive spirituality. I love that so much. And so, the thing is that disabled people are often overlooked in spiritual spaces in general. I mean, and we can see this in a number of different ways in terms of the level of physicality oftentimes that's required in a lot of spiritual places, like bending or kneeling or even washing before prayer, right? Or like consuming certain kind of foods or certain kind of drinks with certain kind of rituals, right? And this can be very exclusionary for a lot of folks and leave folks out depending on, what their limitations or what their abilities are. And so your book is Spirituality for Everybody. I love that. Not everybody, everybody, two different words. And being disabled has so many different implications across a wide number of life areas, so many life areas beyond spirituality. But you chose to talk about this particular topic. You could have written about so many other things, but you chose this topic. So, Dr. Allison, we'd love to hear about your process and your approach in choosing specifically to write about the topic of spirituality as a disabled person.
Honestly, Mona, the topic chose me. Two factors coalesced into me deciding to write this book. First, I grew up attending church, where I learned the spiritual lessons that were deemed appropriate for a child my age. This afforded me a fantastic spiritual underpinning. But when I entered college, I wanted to understand how spirituality applies to disability. I also needed to learn how to do spiritual practices in different ways because the symptoms of CP were changing. So, I looked high and low for books that would answer my questions. And you know what I found?
Oh, yeah.
But yes, absolutely nothing. Given this reality, throughout my years attending college and graduate school, I read books that provided an advanced discussion of general spiritual theory and spiritual practices. I did my best to apply what I learned to my life. Second, after graduating with a PhD in economics, I landed my dream job, doing exactly the work I had wanted to do. While working as an economist dedicated to improving the outcomes of the disability community, many people asked me how I accomplished everything I have, given my kaleidoscope of identities. Realizing that my life story could give people inspiration, I wanted to write a book that told stories from my life. But I wanted my book to go farther. I wanted my book to give people step-by-step guidance for how to live more joyful, fulfilling lives. I wanted to help people know that regardless of the disability they have, they can fulfill their dreams, and fulfilling that dream may be the very reason they were created. But I didn't know how to structure such a book. Thus, I tabled the idea and focused on my career. Although I planned to work as an economist for decades, just months into my career as an economist, my health went completely haywire. After 3.5 years of working full-time and doing my best to manage my health, I finally realized that I needed to retire to focus on improving my health. Taking care of my health meant going to many doctor's appointments. However, I also turned to spirituality to manage my health. I enrolled in online courses and worked with spiritual teachers. A few months into my studies, I had learned enough to modify common spiritual practices for myself. After a few months of doing both intense spiritual study and my self-modified practices, my health improved and I began achieving many lifelong dreams. Not only did I notice changes in my life, so did my friends with disabilities. They asked, "Allison, just what is going on in that apartment of yours?" When I told them, they asked if I could modify practices for them. I did so, and after doing practices that I created for them, they experienced improvements in their lives. After witnessing the results that my friends and I were having doing these modified spiritual exercises, I didn't want to keep this information to myself. I wanted to share it with the larger disability community and the world. But I had absolutely no idea how to do this. Then, during the pandemic, I had an epiphany. I could write a book about this topic. I could write the very book that I wanted to read as a college student and that I wanted to write once I became an economist. That would be my way of helping people learn how to modify spirituality to meet their unique needs, which would help them live joyfully.
And thank goodness you did follow that instinct, because my goodness, we needed it. And, during the pandemic, so many people were challenged to do exactly what your call to action is, because, in the early parts of the pandemic specifically, of not being able to go to those places of community where they normally seek spiritual connection.
Yeah.
And so it really was a call to action to say, okay, how are we going to connect within ourselves, or connect with the divine, or connect with a source energy? How are we going to stay connected or feel aligned in some way with all the different parts of ourselves, including our source self, right? For some people.
Right.
How are we going to do that? And your book is so timely because, it really was something that a lot of people were struggling with, and recognizing that we can be spiritual beings in community and also by ourselves, and also in interpersonal relationships, one-on-one. It's not about Sunday morning alone. That's not the only time to be spiritual, right?
Right.
And we know that in so many ways, and mainstream culture has moved towards understanding that more. But yeah, this is something that still, when we see people going to drum circles or yoga or church or temple or mosque, they're still seeking community in some way, even if it's not in an indoctrinated kind of religious environment.
Yeah.
So this is just such a great call to action to have this tool so that we can tap into our spirituality wherever we are in whatever body we're in. I know in your book, Dr. Allison, you discuss drum circles, and it sounds like that experience for you fostered a really, really, really deep connection to self. Love to hear more about that.
My drum circle was one of the most amazing experiences of connection and belonging in my life. The drum circle began as a response to the pandemic back in March of 2020. my local rehabilitation hospital created several classes on Zoom, and Drum Circle was one of the offerings. Anyone with a disability could sign up for as many classes as they wanted to. When I received the email telling me about Drum Circle, I got so excited that I immediately signed up. Since I had never participated in a drum circle, I didn't know what to expect, but it was so much better than I ever imagined. The leader of the circle was a wheelchair user who created an atmosphere of completely embracing and celebrating every drum circle member. While the leader was instrumental in creating a space where everyone felt like we belonged and were valued, each member also adopted the same mindset and heart set. In between drumming each rhythm, we had many discussions. Some were so hilarious that my tummy hurt from laughing so much. Some were poignant, and yes, some were heartbreaking. But everyone shared in whatever way we could, whenever we wanted to. Sometimes creating an atmosphere of belonging can be easier in groups where people are similar. But we had such a diverse group. Some of us were born with disabilities, others became disabled later in life. Some lived with romantic partners, and others lived in group homes. Since we had different experiences of disability, each of us had to choose to embrace and celebrate each other. We also chose to learn how to make sure everyone was involved in the flow of every circle to the full extent of their abilities and comfort level. We had some members who had intellectual disabilities, so we all did our best to make sure we spoke in ways they could understand. I have a speech disability which could make understanding what I said challenging, but whenever I wanted to speak, everyone would listen closely and take their time to understand me. The length of time it took me to communicate did not matter. The only thing that mattered was that I had something to say, and everyone wanted to know what it was. Every circle member talked about what an amazing group we were, and how great we felt during each circle. We all felt seen, heard, understood, and embraced because each of us chose to see, hear, understand, and embrace each other. We gave that energy to everyone in circle, thus we received that energy back. As I reflect on Drum Circle, I realize that it was such an example of how belonging and connection are verbs. They are choices we make. They are energy we can cultivate, so we not only feel like we belong, we can also be the reason others feel like they belong.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness, all of that. And I could listen to you all day long, by the way. I think your point is so pertinent there when you say that your whole body basically lit up when you found out about these drum circles. And that's that same feeling that we want when we're doing that searching that you're talking about.
Yes.
And we're looking for that feeling. You know, we talk about like when you're dating someone and you get, you know, kind of butterflies or you get a certain kind of sensation that comes with you. It's the same kind of way with spiritual practices. And you came across drum circles that might not have occurred to you, but because you were open, right? It shows up.
Right.
And you're like, oh, you got excited about it. And that was your cue to go looking a little bit more. Sometimes we might not get as excited, right? And so sometimes we might not get as excited, but we might have a little curiosity. And maybe we go look into it and still be open. We don't have to always have that big excitement, kind of like when we're dating. Maybe we're just like, well, we open and see what it's like with this person, right? And then you find out more, right? Yeah. So I love all of that. And, like a lot of people, a lot of disabled folks, I have so many stories of feeling like I don't belong, right? And so for me, I actually claimed my spot in terms of feeling a universal belonging. I had to make that decision. It was a choice, very similar to what you said. I had to choose belonging. I couldn't wait for someone to give it to me. I had to just decide. Like, I see you shaking your head like, no, you can't just wait on folks, because then we're at the mercy of other folks. And I had to say, no, I'm claiming my spot. I belong here. And the way that I did that was, we can do that. There are certain things that tether us here, right? For me, one of the things that tethers me here is this sense of life purpose, that I have something to offer. And, I have this wonderful supportive family. They take me as a whole person, including all the different unexpected changes that can come from day to day. I've worked to be at peace with my body in terms of like self-belonging. And I'm actually deeply grateful for the body that I'm in, because it has really taught me so much and invited me to learn so many different ways to interact with the world. And that has been such a gift for me. Just like any relationship, in terms of the one that I have with my body, we've had to negotiate certain terms. Right? We've had to make some compromises here and there. We've had to be like, okay, wait a second. And, I heard somebody say something the other day, and they were like, my body is just being a bastard, is what they said. I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
It hurt my soul, Dr. Allison, because I felt like, oh, but wait, what are you being to your body? What are you being to your body? That part, right? And it's like, hang on a second. And I used to be so angry with my body in that way. And so we really worked to have this much loving, respectful relationship that's not abusive. I don't call my body names anymore, And so that's been a journey, you know? And, ironically, the place where I think I have felt some of the most isolation in my life is actually in the medical community, where it can be from the conversations I'm having with doctors, where they're just like, well, we don't know what to do for you, take 2 Tylenol and call it a day, some nonsense like that, right? Or it's just like, oh, you'll have to live with it, but there's no even real compassion there. To even just accessibility. I mean, one of my personal, I'll say favorites in quotes, because clearly not a favorite moment of mine, it really put me to tears, was going to an orthopedic office, y'all, an orthopedic office. People rolling up in there, literally in a wheelchair or on crutches, and they did not have, first of all, they didn't have the automatic door button. And second of all, the door was so dang heavy. I ended up falling trying to get in. It was such a nightmare. And it was really, really emotionally painful, apart from the physical pain and that setting me back really a couple of weeks from that fall. And so, that's not the only place, obviously, these medical communities, but in general, Dr. Allison, how do you navigate situations where able-bodied people are isolating you, whether intentionally or not?
There are 2 ways I approach this, on an energetic level and on a physical level. I always begin on the energetic level. At the beginning of most days, before I begin getting ready for the day, I send love before me. Your audience may be wondering, how do you send love before you? And what exactly does this have to do with handling challenging situations? Let me take each question in turn. First, I send love before me by bringing to mind everyone who I will meet that day and saying a silent prayer for each person. So, let's say I have a doctor's appointment. Before I get up for the day, I say, may Dr. So-and-so be surrounded by love. And voila, I have sent love before me. Some people ask, what does this have to do with handling undesirable situations? Everything and everyone is energy or vibe. Many of us have had the experience of entering a room and feeling good vibes or not so good vibes. When we feel those vibes, we are actually feeling energy. And we not only feel energy when we enter a room, we also feel energy when someone enters our space, or even when someone thinks about us. Have you ever had the experience of thinking about someone and later that day or the next day they texted or called you? If so, you felt their energy. When you send love before you, the person you send the love to feels the energy of love you sent to them and reflects that love back to you to the best of their ability when you are in their presence. Most people won't feel the love consciously. They will feel it subconsciously. Also, when you focus on sending love to another person, you surround yourself with the energy of love, which makes your day flow smoother. This practice drastically reduces the number of less than savory incidents I experience. Now, once my day has started and I'm out and about doing my thing, if I experience a non-disabled person whose behavior is contrary to what I want in my life, I respond on the physical level. My response depends on my energy level, my other commitments on that particular day, and above all else, my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll address the situation right away and tell the person a better way to interact with me. Other times, I'll give my caregiver one of two looks and they know, based on my nonverbal cue, to either help me get out of the situation with all due speed or to explain to the person how to interact with me.
Mm.
And other times, I don't say anything directly to the person about their choices because I sense that once the person gets to know me, they will alter their own behavior. So, I have a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah. And, even for folks who don't believe in energy, okay, sending love before you, as you said, puts you in a better space, puts you in a more loving space. You don't have to believe that it's going to have an impact on the other person directly, but it will on you, which ultimately then has an impact on the other person somehow or another. Right? Yeah. And, I talk a lot about symbiosis, about how our inner world and our outer world, how they're interacting with one another. And so if you can get at least your inner world in a loving, calm space, that in itself changes the dynamic because you are now in a position where you have held your power in terms of staying in a space that's not as vulnerable to some of those not so savory experiences, as you say, right? So I define belonging, Dr. Allison, as the experience of being seen, embraced, celebrated in a world that doesn't center disabled people, which, by the way, I love that you said non-disabled people because you center disabled folks, right?
Yeah.
But in a world that generally doesn't, What makes you feel the most seen or embraced or the most celebrated?
So many things. But one of the experiences that makes my heart absolutely sing with joy is having conversations where I can weave comments about my life and perceptions as a disabled woman of color throughout discussions about pop music, spirituality, travel, musical theater, sport, and all of my other interests and hobbies. Like most people, I'm multifaceted, so conversations that give me the opportunity to talk about everything that I love are absolutely scrumptious. Conversations that weave all of my identities, including disability, throughout discussions about my interests are quite simply heavenly. During these conversations, the disability I live with is neither the only topic of discussion, nor is it completely ignored at all costs. It simply is. To be discussed or not discussed, as the conversation warrants. And it's not just about the conversation. As the conversation unfolds, the people I'm with are able to nonchalantly help me with whatever I may need, and in whatever way they can, in a relaxed manner. This helps me feel embraced and celebrated because in these moments, all of me is seen, embraced, and cared for, mind, body, spirit.
Yes. And so when we talk about these interactions with other folks, Dr. Allison, what's something that able-bodied folks can start doing even today to create more inclusivity and more belonging within the spiritual and community spaces?
Language. One of the first actions that these communities can take is speaking inclusively. What are some easy ways to do this? When giving directions to your group, avoid assuming that everyone has the same abilities. Instead, invite those who may not be able to do a specific action to participate in the activity in a way that is appropriate for them. For instance, I don't know about you, Mona, but at most spiritual or religious gatherings I attend, I'll hear the leader say things such as, "Everyone stand for the singing of the song." And there's no invitation made to those who can't stand. So, saying something like, "Please stand if you can," and "Please take a stand in your heart if standing on your feet is not possible," can create an atmosphere where everyone knows they belong and their participation is valued. Also, refrain from saying idioms such as "so-and-so turned a blind eye" or a deaf ear to something. These statements cast disability in an unfavorable light and create an energy of ostracism and attack. And lastly, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to a community event where people did not want to say the word wheelchair, even though I was clearly sitting in one. Or they tried to avoid saying the word disability. I could have given out several gold medals for the linguistic gymnastics people performed to avoid saying these words. But with each attempt to avoid these words, each person was unknowingly creating an energy of isolation and lack of acceptance. As one of my favorite spiritual teachers says, call a thing a thing.
Call a thing a thing.
If a person uses a mobility device, hearing aid, a white cane, or is a service animal, chances are the person knows it and talks about it regularly. So, you don't need to avoid saying those words when speaking to a disabled person. In short, use the appropriate vocabulary when discussing disability.
Yeah.
And if you're unsure of the appropriate language to use, ask the person you are speaking to.
Just the question alone gives you a sense of being seen and celebrated, right? So, last question, Dr. Allison, what does belonging mean to you?
Quite simply, belonging means knowing and, more importantly, embodying whose I am and from whence I come. For when I know and feel that I was created by the divine, and therefore belong to the divine and all of creation, I know that I belong solely because I exist. I need not look to situations outside of myself, because I feel my belonging to all that is of love. I radiate that energy outward and experience belonging in my everyday interactions. In fact, I become the very essence of belonging itself.
Dr. Allison, I belong because I exist.
And only because you exist.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you exist. I'm so glad that you exist, and I'm so glad I exist right here in this moment with you. I adore you. Your energy is infectious. I appreciate you so much, and you have given me a sense that I am right here where I belong, right here with you. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your podcast. Working with you and your team and speaking with you today has been such an awesome experience of belonging and feeling celebrated for who I am. I so appreciate and love how you are creating belonging with your podcast. Love to you.
Much, much, much love to you, Dr. Allison. I love you big. And we just met. You're giving me hugs too. Thank you so much. It has been a great honor, and I'm looking forward to continuing this new relationship. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. All of the show notes and links can be found on my website at drmonanour.com. That's drmonanour.com. Throughout most episodes, you'll hear me referring to the belonging model that I developed, which is represented by a belonging life map that helps you explore areas in your life where you feel more connection and areas where you might feel more isolation. And you can get a free copy of your own belonging life map on my website. Again, that's drmonanour.com. If you like the Belonging Reimagined podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review. That can help more folks find us and keep more episodes coming. Until next time, I'm Dr. Mona. You're right where you belong.